The Franklin Expedition, A Nightmare in the Arctic, May 19, 1845, Greenhithe, England. Crowds gathered along the docks to witness what many believed would become one of the greatest expeditions in the history of the British Empire. Two ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, prepared to sail toward one of the last great mysteries on Earth. Their destination lay far to the north, into the frozen Arctic, a land of endless ice, thick fog, months of darkness, and temperatures capable of killing a man within hours. Many believed these men would make history. Many believed they would discover the legendary Northwest Passage. Many believed they would return home as heroes. But no one knew that this voyage would become one of the greatest exploration disasters ever recorded. Not a single member of the expedition would ever return home. This is the story of the Franklin Expedition, A Nightmare in the Arctic. If you enjoy stories of history, tragedy, and real events that changed the world, welcome to Missing History. Let's uncover the past, one story at a time. The dream called the Northwest Passage. In the early 19th century, Britain ruled the world's oceans. Trade with China, India, and the Far East generated enormous wealth. But there was one major problem. Every merchant ship had to sail around the southern tip of Africa or around Cape Horn at the southern end of South America. Both routes were incredibly long, dangerous, and expensive. Geographers believed there had to be a shorter route, somewhere hidden among the frozen islands north of the American continent. There might exist a sea passage connecting the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. It became known as the Northwest Passage. If it could be found, global shipping would change forever. The voyage between Europe and Asia would become dramatically shorter, strengthening Britain's dominance over world trade. There was only one problem. No one knew whether the passage actually existed or if it could ever be navigated. For decades, one expedition after another ventured into the Arctic. Some turned back. Some became trapped in the ice. Others simply disappeared. Yet the British Admiralty refused to abandon the dream. The prize was simply too important. Many people today assume that Sir John Franklin was the first explorer to venture into the Arctic. In reality, he was following in the footsteps of many remarkable explorers: John Ross, William Parry, James Clark Ross, and among them, Sir John Franklin himself. By 1845, Franklin was 59 years old. He was no inexperienced adventurer. He had already survived multiple Arctic expeditions. He had endured starvation. He had been trapped in sea ice. He had watched members of his own expedition die. During one desperate journey, his party became so hungry that they were forced to boil and eat their leather boots. The ordeal earned Franklin a famous nickname, the man who ate his boots. Despite everything he had suffered, the British government believed there was no one better suited to lead the greatest Arctic expedition ever assembled. The most advanced expedition of its time. Britain spared no expense. The expedition was built around two Royal Navy ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Neither vessel had originally been designed for exploration. They were bomb ships, constructed with exceptionally strong wooden hulls, capable of carrying heavy mortars during wartime. Ironically, those reinforced hulls made them ideal for surviving the crushing pressure of Arctic sea ice. Before departure, both ships underwent extensive modifications. Steam engines were installed, allowing limited propulsion even without favorable winds. A heating system helped warm the living quarters. The ships carried enough preserved food for several years. Thousands of books filled the onboard libraries. Scientific instruments occupied nearly every available space. There was even an organ and other musical instruments, intended to keep morale high during the endless Arctic winters. To the British public, this was the most technologically advanced polar expedition ever launched. It seemed impossible that such a well-equipped mission could fail. Everyone understood that the Arctic was dangerous. They expected snowstorms, bitter cold, towering ice, but they misunderstood one critical fact: the Arctic itself. Many explorers believed that if their ships became trapped, they simply needed to wait until summer. Eventually, the sea ice would melt, and the ships would continue their voyage. That assumption would become the beginning of one of history's greatest disasters. On May 19, 1845, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror cast off from Greenhithe, England. Together, the two ships carried 129 officers and crew, led by Sir John Franklin. Their holds were filled with enough provisions for at least 3 years. Thousands of preserved food tins, tons of coal, scientific instruments, navigation equipment, medical supplies, and everything the Royal Navy believed would ensure success. As the ships drifted away from the docks, families waved goodbye. Bands played patriotic music, and newspapers celebrated the expedition as another triumph of British exploration. No one standing on the shoreline realized they were witnessing the last time these men would ever be seen by their loved ones. The expedition crossed the Atlantic Ocean without major incident. They sailed north toward Greenland, stopping briefly to replenish supplies and transfer mail. Several crew members, judged medically unfit for Arctic service, returned home aboard supply ships. It would become the luckiest decision of their lives. Those men, dismissed before the expedition entered the Arctic, would be among the very few connected to the voyage who survived. Everyone else continued north. By late July 1845, the expedition entered Baffin Bay, the vast body of water separating Greenland from Arctic Canada. It was here that the outside world saw them for the last time. On July 26, 1845, two British whaling ships, the Prince of Wales and the Enterprise, encountered HMS Erebus and HMS Terror in the waters of Baffin Bay. The crews exchanged greetings. Everything appeared normal. The officers seemed confident. The ships looked well supplied. No signs of distress were reported. After a brief conversation, the Franklin expedition sailed westward toward Lancaster Sound. The whalers continued home. None of them could have imagined that they had just become the last Europeans ever to see Franklin's expedition alive. After that meeting, the expedition disappeared completely. Months passed, then years. No letters arrived. No reports returned. No ship came home. It was as though the Arctic had simply swallowed them whole. Beachy Island. The expedition successfully entered Lancaster Sound, one of the gateways to the Canadian Arctic archipelago. Before winter arrived, Franklin chose to anchor at a small island now known as Beachy Island. There, the crews prepared for the long Arctic winter. The ships were secured against drifting ice. Coal was rationed. Food inventories were checked. Scientific observations continued. The men settled into what they expected would be a temporary winter camp. Life aboard the ships remained surprisingly organized. Meals were served on schedule. Church services continued. Books were read. Music echoed through the cabins. The officers even organized theatrical performances to keep spirits high during the endless darkness. From the outside, everything seemed under control. But hidden beneath the frozen ground of Beachy Island, 3 graves would later reveal that something had already begun to go terribly wrong. The first deaths. The first sailor to die was leading stoker John Torrington. He was only 20 years old. Soon afterward, able seaman John Hartnell also died. Then came Royal Marine William Braine. 3 young men, 3 carefully prepared graves, 3 unanswered questions. When later search expeditions discovered the cemetery, they were puzzled. Why had healthy young sailors died so early? There were no signs of battle, no evidence of starvation, no obvious explanation. At the time, their deaths remained a complete mystery. Only more than a century later, when modern scientists examined the remarkably preserved bodies buried in the Arctic permafrost, would new clues begin to emerge. But in 1846, the surviving crew had no choice except to continue. As spring returned, the graves were left behind, and the expedition sailed farther south, deeper into waters that no European ships had successfully navigated before. Entering the trap. During the summer of 1846, Franklin guided the expedition through Peel Sound, one of the most promising routes toward the elusive Northwest Passage. For a brief moment, it seemed the expedition might actually succeed. Then, everything changed. The sea ice began closing around the ships. At first, it appeared to be only a temporary obstacle. The crew had encountered drifting ice before. They expected warmer weather to break it apart. Instead, the ice kept growing thicker. Day after day, week after week, the pressure increased. The ships slowed, then stopped. Finally, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror became completely imprisoned in the ice off the northwest coast of King William Island. The officers remained calm. Surely next summer, the ice would melt. Surely they only needed to wait. But the Arctic had other plans. The ships would never sail again. A second Arctic winter. Summer came, and summer went. But the ice never released the ships. The crew waited, hoping each passing week would bring warmer temperatures and open water. Instead, the frozen sea remained solid. By the end of 1846, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror had entered a second Arctic winter. For months, the sun disappeared below the horizon. Darkness engulfed the ships. Outside, temperatures plunged far below freezing. Powerful winds swept across the frozen landscape, driving snow against the hulls day and night. Inside, life continued as best it could. Coal heated parts of the ships. Meals were prepared from preserved supplies. Scientific observations continued whenever possible. The officers maintained strict routines. Routine was one of the few weapons they had against despair. Although the expedition had enough food on paper, living aboard trapped ships was very different from sailing across open water. Fresh meat had become scarce. Fresh vegetables no longer existed. The crew relied almost entirely on preserved food, salted meat, ship's biscuits, dried vegetables, and thousands of sealed tin cans. At the time, canned food was considered one of the greatest technological advances in naval history. No one suspected that those very supplies might one day contribute to disaster. The ships themselves had become prisons. There was nowhere to go, nothing new to see, only endless snow and endless silence. The death of Sir John Franklin. Then came the greatest blow of all. On June 11, 1847, Sir John Franklin died. The official record never explained the exact cause, whether illness, heart disease, pneumonia, or a combination of factors. No one knows for certain. He was 59 years old. After more than 2 years in the Arctic, the expedition had lost its commander. Leadership now passed to Captain Francis Crozier, with Captain James Fitzjames serving beside him. The mission continued, but everything had changed. Without Franklin, the burden of impossible decisions now rested upon Crozier's shoulders. Hope begins to fade. Another summer arrived. Again, the crew waited for the ice to break. Again, nothing happened. The ships remained frozen in exactly the same place. Food supplies slowly declined. Coal reserves diminished. More men became sick. Some suffered from extreme weakness. Others developed unexplained illnesses. Simple yearly tasks became exhausting. Even carrying firewood or climbing the rigging required enormous effort. No one knew exactly why. Today, scientists believe several factors may have combined: malnutrition, vitamin deficiencies, extreme cold, psychological stress, and possibly exposure to lead from the expedition's food system and water distillation equipment. Each factor alone was dangerous. Together, they proved devastating. The last official message. By the spring of 1848, the officers finally accepted the truth. The ships were not going anywhere. On April 25, 1848, Captain Francis Crozier and Captain James Fitzjames wrote what would become the expedition's final official record. The document was placed inside a brass message cylinder hidden within a stone cairn at Victory Point on King William Island. It reported the grim reality. Sir John Franklin was dead. 24 officers and crew had already died. The ships had remained trapped in the ice since September 1846, and now, after nearly 3 years in the Arctic, the survivors were abandoning HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. It was the last written message ever left by the expedition. No official diary, no captain's log, no final explanation has ever been found. Leaving the ships behind, there were still approximately 105 survivors. Each man faced an impossible decision: remain aboard ships that might never move again, or leave the only shelter they had ever known. Crozier chose to march south. The men gathered what they believed they would need: food, weapons, boats mounted on heavy sledges, navigation instruments, personal belongings. They stepped down from the ships and began walking across the frozen Arctic. Their destination lay hundreds of kilometers away, toward the Back River, where they hoped to find rescue, or at least reach territories where indigenous people lived. But they faced overwhelming odds: weak, hungry, exhausted, dragging enormous sledges across rough sea ice. With every step, their chances of survival grew smaller. The ships slowly disappeared behind them, silent, motionless, abandoned forever. Into the white wilderness. No photographs exist of that desperate march. No survivor ever returned to describe it. Only scattered artifacts, abandoned boats, human remains, and Inuit testimony allow us to imagine what happened next. The men disappeared into one of the harshest environments on Earth. One by one, they vanished. The Arctic, once seen as Britain's greatest opportunity, had become their final resting place. When Britain finally became concerned, at first, the disappearance of the Franklin expedition did not immediately alarm the British Admiralty. In the 19th century, Arctic expeditions often remained out of contact for years. Silence was expected. Ships disappeared beyond the edge of the known world, and no one anticipated hearing from them until they returned. But as the years passed, the silence became impossible to ignore. 2 years, 3 years, still no word, no letters, no survivors, no ships, only questions. The greatest expedition Britain had ever launched had simply vanished. The largest search operation of the age. In 1848, the British Admiralty finally began searching for Franklin. What started as a single rescue mission quickly became something far greater. Over the following decade, more than 30 expeditions, by sea, by land, and even privately funded voyages, set out to search the Arctic. Hundreds of sailors, explorers, scientists, and indigenous guides joined the effort. It became one of the largest search operations of the 19th century. Ironically, the search for Franklin accomplished something remarkable. Although the expedition itself was lost, the rescue missions mapped vast areas of the Canadian Arctic that had never been accurately surveyed before. In trying to find one missing expedition, Britain expanded the world's knowledge of the Arctic more than ever before. Beachy Island. Then, in 1850, the first major discovery was made. On a lonely stretch of frozen ground at Beachy Island, searchers found 3 graves. Simple white wooden markers stood silently against the Arctic landscape. The names read John Torrington, John Hartnell, William Brain. 3 young sailors. All had died during the expedition's very first winter. The graves proved that Franklin had reached Beachy Island safely, but they also revealed something disturbing. Men had already begun dying long before the expedition became trapped. What had killed them remained unknown. The message hidden in stone. The greatest breakthrough came 9 years later. In 1859, Captain Francis Leopold McClintock's expedition discovered a stone cairn on King William Island. Inside, hidden within a brass message cylinder, was a folded Royal Navy form. Today, it is known as the Victory Point Record. It remains the single most important document ever recovered from the Franklin expedition. The message revealed the truth. The ships had become trapped in the ice. In September 1846, Sir John Franklin had died on June 11, 1847. By April 1848, 24 officers and crew were already dead. The remaining 105 survivors had abandoned HMS Erebus and HMS Terror and were attempting to march south on foot. It was the expedition's final official communication. After that, there was only silence. The Inuit testimonies. As search expeditions continued, they began speaking with local Inuit communities. The stories they heard were haunting. Some Inuit hunters recalled seeing groups of exhausted white men dragging heavy sledges across the ice. The strangers appeared weak. Many struggled to walk. Some collapsed. Others never stood up again. The Inuit also described abandoned boats, scattered equipment, and human remains lying across the frozen landscape. For many years, European investigators dismissed these accounts. Only decades later, archaeological discoveries confirmed that much of the Inuit testimony had been remarkably accurate. Without their knowledge, many of the expedition's final clues might never have been found. A desperate fight for survival. Modern archaeological investigations uncovered even more disturbing evidence. Several human bones recovered from King William Island displayed unmistakable cut marks made by knives. Others showed fractures consistent with deliberate breakage, suggesting the bones had been opened to extract marrow. To scientists, these were heartbreaking signs of extreme starvation. They strongly suggested that, during the final stages of the disaster, at least some members of the expedition resorted to cannibalism in a desperate attempt to survive. It remains one of the darkest chapters in the history of Arctic exploration, not because of cruelty, but because of the unimaginable conditions these men endured. The mystery of lead poisoning. In the 1980s, scientists exhumed the remarkably preserved bodies buried at Beachy Island. The frozen Arctic permafrost had protected them for more than a century. Autopsies revealed unusually high levels of lead within their bodies. The discovery sparked a new theory. Some researchers believed the expedition's enormous supply of canned food, sealed with lead-based solder, may have contaminated their diet. Others suggested that the ship's freshwater distillation system also contained lead components, allowing the metal to accumulate over time. Lead poisoning can cause confusion, fatigue, poor judgment, digestive illness, and severe physical weakness. Could it have influenced the crew's decisions? Could it have reduced their ability to survive? The debate continues today. Most historians now believe lead exposure was likely one contributing factor, but not the sole cause of the tragedy. The Franklin expedition was probably overwhelmed by many hardships at once: extreme cold, malnutrition, disease, psychological stress, physical exhaustion, and the relentless Arctic itself. Together, they created a disaster from which there was almost no escape. A discovery 170 years later. For more than a century and a half, the final resting places of HMS Erebus and HMS Terror remained one of history's greatest maritime mysteries. Generations of explorers searched, scientists searched, archaeologists searched, yet the Arctic revealed nothing. Then, in 2014, history changed. Using sonar, underwater robots, and decades of research, Canadian archaeologists finally located HMS Erebus beneath the icy waters of the Canadian Arctic. It was one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. But the biggest surprise was still to come. Only 2 years later, in 2016, HMS Terror was discovered. Its condition astonished the world. The ship was extraordinarily well preserved. Cabins still stood. Windows remained intact. Doors were still in place. Furniture, equipment, and countless artifacts appeared almost untouched. It looked less like a shipwreck and more like a vessel whose crew had simply stepped ashore and never returned. The Arctic preserved their story. Why had the ships survived for so long? The answer lies in the Arctic itself. The freezing water, combined with extremely low oxygen levels, slowed decay dramatically. Unlike shipwrecks in warmer seas, where bacteria, marine organisms, and powerful currents quickly destroy wooden vessels, the Arctic acted like an enormous natural freezer. For nearly 170 years, it protected the ships waiting silently beneath the ice. Today, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror remain underwater archaeological sites protected by the Government of Canada. Rather than raising the ships, researchers continue to explore them where they rest. Each expedition uncovers another small piece of the story: navigation instruments, ceramic plates, glass bottles, clothing, personal belongings. Every artifact offers another glimpse into the final days of the expedition. Even now, the Arctic continues to reveal its secrets, one discovery at a time. Should they have stayed? For more than 170 years, one question has continued to divide historians. Should Franklin's men have remained aboard their ships instead of abandoning them? At first, the answer seems obvious. The ships provided shelter. They still contained food, fuel, and protection from the wind. But the reality was far more complicated. The waters surrounding King William Island were locked within one of the Arctic's most formidable regions of pack ice. This was not ordinary seasonal ice. It was massive, thick, slow-moving sea ice capable of imprisoning ships for years. Modern climate studies suggest that, even if the crew had waited another summer, or perhaps another year, the outcome might not have changed. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, many Arctic expeditions became trapped for 2, 3, or even 4 consecutive years. Some remained frozen even longer. When Captain Crozier ordered the men to leave in April 1848, they may not have been choosing between life and death. Instead, they may have been forced to choose between two different ways to die: remain aboard and slowly starve, or march into one of the harshest environments on Earth, hoping for a rescue that would never come. It was an impossible decision, one that none of us can truly judge from the comfort of the modern world. The Arctic never gave them back. Today, when we look across the endless Arctic Ocean, its frozen silence feels almost unchanged from 1845. The vast white landscape stretches beyond the horizon. There are no cities, no roads, no signs of civilization. Only ice, wind, and unimaginable distance. Somewhere beneath those frozen waters rest HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. Nearby, scattered across the shores of King William Island, lie the final traces of the 129 men who dreamed of completing the Northwest Passage. Most of their names have faded into history, but their story has not. The Franklin expedition reshaped Arctic exploration. It changed the way future expeditions prepared for polar travel. It demonstrated the importance of learning from indigenous Arctic knowledge. And it reminded the world that even the greatest technology of its time could still be defeated by nature. History often remembers great victories, but sometimes it is the tragedies that teach us the most. The Franklin expedition was launched with the finest ships, the best equipment, and some of the most experienced officers in the Royal Navy. Yet none of those advantages could overcome the unforgiving Arctic. Nearly 2 centuries later, their story continues to captivate historians, archaeologists, and explorers around the world. Not because they reached their destination, but because they never did. Perhaps the greatest mystery was never what happened to Franklin's men. Perhaps the real mystery is how a place so silent, so beautiful, and so empty could hold their story for nearly 170 years before slowly giving it back to the world. The Arctic never conquered them. It simply never let them leave. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this documentary and would like to explore more remarkable stories from the past, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and joining us again for another journey into history. Until next time, this is Missing History. Thank you for watching.